Hey guys, it's Penguin here and welcome back to another gold making video. In today's video, I'm going to be showing you guys my favorite specialization builds for right now in Dragonflight with the release of 10.0.7. Specifically, we're going to be covering all of the 8 crafting professions, so whether you are starting a new alt and want to pick up a profession, or maybe you are just finally starting Dragonflight, this can help you out. Also, do keep in mind that with favorite in the title, this is definitely my opinion, and I don't expect everybody to agree. But hopefully this can lead you in the right direction if you don't know where to start. But without further ado, here we go. And so to get started, these are not in any particular order. We're going to start out with Inscription, and I actually have 2 different paths to recommend. Firstly, my favorite right now are Missives, which I've actually talked about in a recent video. Just right now, of course, all of these prices fluctuate, but right here, everything is generally pretty profitable. Of course, this is only 6 gold, but right here we are making about 17, a little over 17 each. Right here we're making 15, this one's not that profitable. Right here at 24, 8, etc. Some negative, some positive. Either way, Missives do great. And a huge positive that I like for Missives is even though it is a region-wide market, it does not get undercut that frequently. I've had plenty of times where I post either 25 or 50 Missives at once, and they will actually all sell out without me having to repost them. So yes, they're a region-wide market, but they're a lot less competitive than others. Now, the big deciding factor on if you guys can actually go this specialization is how much gold you have in your pocket and how much you're willing to spend. The reason why I say that is it is very, very important to max out Inscription. You cannot do this without maxing it out, which means you actually have to afford to do that. Now, thankfully, you can actually level up this profession without work orders. The only requirement is that you need to be valued with the Artisans Consortium, and then you can pick up the rolling pin recipe right here from the vendor. Then all you have to do is mass produce this item. Technically, no BOP materials, just buy it off the auction house, and then craft it until you hit 100. That is where the pricey part comes in, because right now if we update the prices, as you can see, it's about, 2.4k per pin, and you are going to be crafting a lot of these. Personally, I think it took me about 55 rolling pins to level up, but that's give or take due to RNG. But if you are somebody who wants to go along with this plan, then you do have to put in some knowledge points. What you're going to want to do is max out Rune Mastery. This is just going to give you generic skill. And then over in Archiving, you're going to need to put a bit of points in here. What you'll need to do is max out Archiving. Once again, this will give you plenty of skill. Then technically you only have to put 10 points into Shared Knowledge, unless you've already unlocked the treaties. Then you're going to have to go to 20 to get your other sub-spec, and then lastly 20. So at the very, very least, you're going to have to put 20, 10, 30, so about 60 points, and then about 40 right here, so a total of 100 points. At that rate, you're going to be able to make profit with Missives. Definitely make sure you get yourself a multi-craft tool, and you're good to go. Keep in mind, this is going to work for any single other profession, but keep in mind you always have the ability to improve the basics by, improving your resourcefulness. Theoretically, you could put the extra 20 points in here, so I'm not saying that is the end all of specs, but that is just how to get started and to start making gold. Now, to anybody who did not like the Missive route just because it's way too expensive, you don't have the rep, whatever it is, you can go a lot more basic, and thankfully, this is pretty much available to anybody. What you're going to want to do is once again max out Rune Mastery, and I highly recommend maxing out Infinite Discovery, which is the inspiration trait. What these traits do by themselves is give you a really great foundation. For example, right here, I can craft these runed wraith barks. Yes, you'll have slightly less skill than me, just because of, Inscription and all of that, but as long as you can guarantee quality too, you can make some decent profit. And actually, it is more than this, just ignore the fact that I don't have enough. You could either simulate it to get the correct price. There you go. So right now we're making about 9 gold per wraith bark. Nothing crazy, but you can mass produce this. You also have the ability to do this with chilled runes, and this is where you can kind of branch off. If you're interested in ink crafting, which right here, as you guys can see, it is pretty profitable, or to increase the profit margins to improve your crafts, I highly recommend speccing into Flawless Ink, which is going to be another 20-point investment. Also, another thing that you can do, which I have done, if you guys want to do weapon runes, which are these down right here, these buzzings, chirping, and howling, then you can spec into this tree right here, or spec into the middle node if you want Fantas runes. But a lot of these are some pretty good options, and they play off each other very, very well. But this is my recommendations for Inscription. Up next, we have Leatherworking, and this recommendation is way more simple because I really only do one thing, and these are the elemental reagents. If you guys haven't caught on by now, I do not do anything with work orders or armor related, so you won't see any of these on this list, but that doesn't mean they're bad. But the reagents that I'm talking about are the ones right here, which right now we will have to see depending on profit margins. Right here, as you guys can see, the scales aren't that good, but the Frostbite is bringing in about 21 gold. Then we have the Infurious bringing in about 27, scales bringing in about 100, negative, and then negative. So off and on like always, but these are some pretty great profit margins. For those reagents, what you're going to want to do is max out Discipline. This will get you plenty of skill, and then you also want to max out Curing and Tanning. Then, for the sake of completionist, I highly recommend getting yourself the Inspiration, and then you're going to move over to this last tab. These two actually affect the ability of using and crafting elemental items. So right here is going to give you plenty of skill, and then this one specifically will actually help you with crafting those elemental reagents. So right here, this is about a 60-point commitment. On top of that 30, so 90, then we have 115, and then 145. So yes, it's kind of a long journey, but you don't necessarily need every single point to make the most gold. Once again, if you want to take it a step further, I recommend maxing out resourcefulness as well. Just saves you a bit of gold. And the last one I recommend before I forget is also speccing into the primacy. As you guys can see, this affects the ire-infused reagents, which is the blood ones that were the highest profit margins, these two right there. So once again, if you're going for the max of max, I recommend that all, but you don't need everything to start making profit. Moving on, we have Tailoring, which is actually one of my favorite professions, and I actually kind of have 3 different specialization paths to talk about. And so the first thing I want to talk about is something that I used to recommend, but probably not anymore. If you asked me at the start of Dragonflight and in Dragonflight Beta, cooldowns looked super powerful, which is this tree right here, and more specifically, I'm talking about the Chrono Cloth and Azure Weave. The reason why they are pretty bad at the moment is because there's been so many bugs with these cooldowns, which is making people craft way more than they should, and those bugs are still not fixed. So the value of these items just have gone down way more. Now, if you have a bunch of alts and you're looking for a low effort path, you could consider this, but at the moment, I'm just not going to recommend it. So the other specialization I want to talk about is actually specifically bags. And this one is probably the simplest one on this list, but there's a slight catch with reputation. Right now, bags and tailoring are super good on most servers. Of course, these are server-side items, so it really depends, but on my server, I can make about, 670 profit per expedition bag, and I can make almost 5,000 profit from the reagents. Of course, I can make a pretty decent amount of profit as well, 40 and then about 30 from reagents. Keep in mind, I am on a medium pop server, so a lot of people may experience way less prices, but this still applies. And your main goal for this is to simply max out embroidery. So it's going to cost you about 5 points to unlock a sub-spec, and then 30 to max it out, so about 35 points. If you want to go above and beyond, you can also max out resourcefulness, which is another 30 and 10-point commitment, so that's 40 plus 35, so only 75 points. The reason why this is so useful is looking at these bags, our crafting cost is about 1,000 gold, and that is simply because it's about 300 gold per bolt. So what you can do, you're going to want to get as much resourcefulness as possible, get yourself a resourcefulness tool. Then with that embroidery trait, you'll be able to use different finishing reagents, and you want this one right here, which is going to save us 75% every time we proc resourcefulness, and these only cost about a couple of gold per. So now we have a 34% chance of proccing saving materials, and we're going to get 25% more materials every time we proc. So if we save, 2 bolts during crafting, our crafting cost goes down from 1,000 to only about 300, and it's insanely powerful. Then lastly, the final specialization is a little bit more basic, and it's really just for materials once again. Vibrant bolts do pretty well most of the time. Right here I'm at, 563. Infurious bolts also do very well at 40 gold per, and this one's pretty simple. What you're going to want to do is max out mastery for all the skill points possible, and you're going to want to max out inspiration. Then in the textiles, you're going to want to max out textiles as well as weaving, and you're basically good to go. I also recommend maxing out resourcefulness, but you can save that to the end. So that's about 90 points, and then also 50 over here, so about 140 points, and you're good to go. But reagents do super well, and we'll move on to the next. Then for enchanting, we're going back to something very, very simple, and it really just depends on what enchant you really want to focus on. What you're definitely going to want to do is max out this generic trait and also max out inspiration, since a lot of the high-end enchants you can never guarantee, so inspiration is going to be your best friend. After that, I highly recommend maxing out enchantment. It's going to give you a bunch of just generic skill, and then choose a specific path you want to focus on. This side of the tree over here is all about weapon enchantments, so if that interests you, go to this side, and the other side is basically everything else: profession tool enchantments, chest, rings, bracers, all of that. A big misconception that I do want to bring up is this tree right here. From first glance, it doesn't seem that important because, this is just the disenchanting tree, this is primal extraction, nothing crazy, but there's a lot of hidden gems hidden in here. For example, I have 24 points into primal extraction, and these little, side bonuses that we get actually give us a lot of stats. Right here, we gain a +5 inspiration, and I gain a +5 skill from just having these points in here. From the 40 right here, +5 resourcefulness, +5 inspiration, skill, resourcefulness, inspiration, etc. In addition to all of these hidden stats and skill bonuses within these 3 trees, primal extraction is also super great. Once it's maxed out, if you use primal extraction, you'll actually get a buff that increases your skill when crafting, which just gives you even more profit if you need that little bit of a skill boost. So definitely recommend it, but enchanting is pretty simple. We are officially halfway done, and up next we have blacksmithing, which once again, you guys can guess it by now, of course is just another simple reagent build, mostly targeted around alloys. This one is pretty simple, and all you have to do is, of course, max out that specialty smithing to just get some skill bonuses, and then you're going to want to put all of your points into smelting. This is going to give you a ton of multi-craft, which is going to be super helpful. After that, in hammer control, you're going to want to max out this one for generic skill, and then I do recommend going into inspiration, and lastly, you can also go into resourcefulness. If you're interested in the other reagents like stones and all of that, you can also go into stonework, and even if you're interested in profession tools or anything as well, you can also go into toolsmithing. But right now, as you guys can see, the frost fire is not making it too much profit for me, but even with very, very basic tools, very basic skill, I'm still making about 40 gold profit with these alloys. So right here, this is a prime example of you do not need a fully maxed out profession, you don't need an optimized profession to make some decent gold. Up next, we have 2 recommendations for Jewelcrafting, and the first one is definitely going to be for the people who enjoy cancel scanning. One of my biggest moneymakers right now are Dragonflight gems, but the huge caveat is that you have to be able to cancel scan a ton. And to put it in perspective, I am somebody who has a second account just to sit on the auction house, but every time I post about 5 gems, all I have to do is breathe and they will be undercut. So this is definitely the opposite of Missives, and it's definitely insanely competitive. But if you are interested, this step is pretty simple. What you're going to want to do is max out this main gem trait right here. This is going to give you a bunch of skill, and then you have an option to pick. What you have to do is max out one of these specializations, which means you're going to have to dedicate 40 points to a specific type of gem you want to do. The first one that I did was air, and then I did fire, and now I'm working on frost, but whichever category you choose, I highly recommend putting all points there and then moving on to the next. Don't, put 5 in each and slowly build them all at the same time, because there just won't be profit. In addition to that, all you have to do is put 30 points into mastery, and technically you're good to go. That is, 30 points, 40, so 70, and about 130 points for one section of gems. As you guys can see, I have made a ton of mistakes. I have random points into necklaces and all of this random stuff, but it's still 100% doable, especially if you're starting out. If you want to go one step further, definitely get your resourcefulness up and then try to work on all gems to make sure you can guarantee quality 3 with all of them. Then the second build I have is, instead of gems, we're going to be focusing on the crafting reagents, which are the harmonies, sands, phials, lenses, stones, clasps, etc. Now, I actually have 2 jewel crafters for this. I'm not going to log off just for the sake of it, but I'll put a picture whenever I talk about specializations to show you guys. But the specializations that you're going to want to do is, of course, max out your mastery right here. Then you're going to likely want to max out inspiration, because you probably won't be able to guarantee quality 3 for everything. Then over in enterprising, you're going to want to max out the main trait over here, and then you're going to want to focus on the bottom one. This is going to be for all reagents that don't use glass, and then the actual glassware, which is all the rest of the reagents. In addition to this, you can also go into prospecting if that interests you, but for just reagent crafting, you don't necessarily need that. Once again, to make this even more powerful, feel free to max out resourcefulness, and if you hold off with the inspiration and you max out jewel crafting, you might be able to get away with not needing it, but I do recommend for most people, you might want to get some inspiration, but you can always hold off until later, just in case. Alright, this brings us to our final character, or our final 2 professions, and we have engineering. Now, this one is going to be heavily biased, as engineering is one of my side alts, but I can show you that you don't need a lot of points to make a good amount of gold. So right here, this is basically my specialization tree. I have a few points into other categories, about 5 right there, that I don't necessarily want. I wish I just put it all into efficiency, but this is just a very simple build for all of your crafting parts right here. If we take a look, let me just look up the auction house. There we go. Most of the time, these make some pretty good profit. Of course, it depends. Right there, we're making about 3 gold or so per coil. About 4 gold per the gears. Right now, the powder's not doing very well. We're making about 15 per chassis, and we're making about 8 gold or so per capacitor. And keep in mind, this is with, subpar stats and all of that. But there's still plenty of gold, and my favorite piece right here is actually the inhaler, because it doesn't require any sort of quality, and these have some insane profits, and I always sell out of these. So my recommended build is firstly to just unlock your first sub-spec at 5 points, and then immediately throw about 20 points into Scrapper. This will give you the inhaler recipe, so you can immediately start making gold. After that, it's pretty much up to you. If you want to kind of go the completionist route, you know, you can max out Scrapper and then go back to efficiency, then move on to generalist and then piece parts, or you can do it way different. It really just depends, but I highly recommend this tree for anybody. Now, to anybody who is looking to go a little bit more advanced with engineering, I can't speak on this myself, but I know plenty of people are making a ton of gold with ammunition and scopes, and also plenty of people are making gold with the different Tinker's items as well as explosives. So I'm not saying this is the route you have to go, but it's one that's very simple and very profitable. Then lastly, we have the profession that I have been avoiding, and this is Alchemy. The reason why I've been avoiding it is just I feel like I don't have time for every single profession, so I had to drop one, and Alchemy got the boot. Also, with Alchemy, it is very, very hard to make profit. You gotta have the best build possible, and still, it's pretty slim, but if you can be the best of the best, there is some pretty good gold to be made. Now, because of my specialization tree looking like this, and like this, I cannot give you the best recommendation, but I can give you a tip. What I recommend is either going strictly into Phial Mastery or go strictly into Potion. Don't mix and match until you have one maxed or the other. Also, I want to bring your attention to the add-on at the top of my screen, which is CraftSim. I already have a few tutorials on this add-on, so I'm not going to talk about it much in this video, but I want to highlight this specialization info button. So for example, let's say I am an alchemist who really wants to make high quality elemental chaos, but I don't know what to spec into. I can select specialization mode, and there we go, it tells me exactly that. So it tells me every single specialization node that actually affects this and how much points I have into them. So for example, I have batch production unlocked, but 0 points there. I have lore unlocked and 10 out of 25, and I still have to unlock the frost formulated, air formulated, and resourcefulness, or resourceful routines. So this is just simply a great tool. Now, by the time this video comes out, most professions do have specialization info. Some of them are still a work in progress, but this applies to anything. So if I talked about missives and you're still a little bit confused about them, or you just come across an item and you really want to be the best at it, you know, quickly show specialization info and follow that guide. It's super simple and very handy. But yeah guys, that is it for my favorite in my builds right now, going into 10.0.7. Like I stated at the beginning of this video, keep in mind these are just my builds and I am 100% biased. There's been millions of people who have made gold with work orders. I just don't do it personally, so I can't recommend something I've never done before. But definitely, you know, explore, take chances, see what happens, and I hope this helps everybody. But thank you guys so much for watching, and have a good day.